items. I will be screen sharing the items as well as the examples. Colleen will be doing the talking, and Bree, please make sure to check the chat for any questions. Also, if you would like to just pause us and raise your question or go ahead and ask the question, we're definitely welcome. And I'm also going to put links in the chat in case if you guys want to follow on your own screen time. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm putting them in the chat. And Colleen, the floor is yours.
Okay, sounds good. All right, and I'm just gonna say I tend to talk a little fast, so feel free to just, raise your hand, tell me to slow down, or if there's anything that I went over too fast, please feel free to, to stop me and kind of clarify if you guys have any questions. But you guys all should have access to this agenda. And we're just going to skip down to the new items just to make sure that we get through all of these. And then we'll go back up to the just the refresher items that we just kind of wanted to talk about on this meeting to just kind of give you just kind of a little refresher on things that maybe we're noticing that are hitting a little bit more. So on our new items. So the sponsor actually has come back. We've submitted, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 maybe by now, quarterly invoices and actually biannual and invoices. Anyway, and we thought they were going just fine, but they actually came back this last time and they said that they were needing more detail just as far as the line items on the invoices. So what you guys have been submitting has been great because we do have all of the backup information that we need. It's just they're needing on the actual spreadsheets themselves, they're wanting things broken down line item a little bit more clear. Kind of going to be a little bit more work on you guys' end, but when you think of the overall, it's kind of like we see it as we're looking at a lot of these line items, so it's going to be tedious to us, but the sponsor, they have one person that is reviewing all of these invoices, and there's 13 collaboratives. So that person has a lot to review as well. So I kind of get the logic behind they would like to be able to see it a lot more easily just on these spreadsheets, even though we do, if they were to go back and look at the actual invoices, all this information is there. It's not a matter that we're not submitting it to them. It's just they would like to be able to see it in these spreadsheets just so that when they're going through and doing their quick reviews and audits, it's just simpler for them to be able to see it on this spreadsheet. So this is what they've asked us to go to do going forward. Luckily, we kind of talked them out of making us go back. So this is just what we will have to do going forward. But as I said that, we do have to go back and for our the quarter 3 invoices that you guys submitted. So the ones that were for 1/1 of 26 through 3/31/26 that you guys have just submitted, those will need to be done in this new format. And so if you click on your, you guys should all have access to that in the agenda where it says only one invoicing spreadsheet now for both cycle 1, cycle 2. If you guys can all click on that, look for your institution. You should have in there, you should see the highlighted invoice that needs to be, if you submitted one for quarter 3, that should be highlighted in yellow. So if you see that, that tells you that you do need to go back and redo that invoice, not submitting anything new to us. You'll just need to go into this spreadsheet and separate those out line item as we're going to show you how it needs to be done. But those ones will need to be done this new way, basically. But like I say, don't need to submit anything more to us. Those guys have already been paid and all the documentation is there. It will just need to be done on that spreadsheet in this new format. So let me know if that's confusing to anybody or if we need to explain, and it might be a little bit more, once we show the examples, it might be a little bit more understandable. So we've just kind of taken a little bit of a snapshot to just kind of give you a small thing of what we're talking about, and then we'll show you the examples. So down here we have on your financial ledger, you're going to have basically what they're saying is if they want whatever they see on their ledger, that amount. So this person, they went to Lowe's and they have a transaction for $333.03. That's the line item that's showing on their ledger. So the sponsor is requiring us to, on each of that line item, they want that $333 written out. And then they want us to put each one of those is going to need a warrant date, which we are saying that's the date that it would hit your ledger. So not necessarily the date like the receipt would be, it would be the date that it shows up on your actual ledger. Then the warrant number for us, and this is kind of going to be a little bit flexible because obviously warrant number is going to be different if it's based upon a salary or a benefit, or if it's a materials and supplies. Warrant numbers are going to be changeable if you're at a university versus a school district. So this is just, we're giving you as a sample as what we put in here as a warrant number if it was a materials and supplies. But if any of you guys have any questions about what should I put in these first three fields, first three columns, I guess I should say, reach out, because I don't think that they're going to be the same for everybody. And so we might just kind of, do our best guess of this is what we think we should go in there. I don't think that they're going to be quite as strict on these. They just want them to be broken out a little bit better so that they can easily see, 4,300, like we used 4,300. Those account codes, as you can see, those strings are incredibly long if we were to list out that huge long account code. So we said we're just going to use the overall generic, that 4,300 for materials and supplies. That's what we put in there as our account code, instead of listing out that 019372 4,300. Instead of listing that big long string, we just said we're identifying that as materials and supplies is 4,300. So like I say, your institution might not have that, maybe it's like a simple a thing, or it might be, a lot more broad. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out and we can help you kind of, decide which one would be the best on those first three if you have any questions on those. But like I say, I don't think they're going to be quite as, strict on if those things are, you put maybe the wrong thing in there thinking you should list maybe a receipt number or something like that versus a PO. I don't think that's something that they're going to be that strict on. It's more about listing out each line item based upon the receipt. And so then I think the other ones are kind of self-explanatory. You'll just put the vendor. So obviously this was Lowe's that they went and purchased these items from, and then a description. And you'll see on the bottom where we attach the receipts as well. But you can see, they purchased many things at Lowe's, right, to make up this 333. We're not going to go in there. We're not going to list everything out. We had several, I don't know, 20 items or something like that. We're not listing each one of that, but you can go ahead and generalize those, obviously. So we put in there, that it was black tape and some clear loss and some signs. So they're not expecting you to write out, all 20 items. It might just be something as far as like for items for a workshop or something like that. If you've got a whole bunch of things listed in one PO or something like that, certainly don't need you to list out every line item. Um, but once again, they're trying to just be able to see if you went and purchased something at Lowe's, what were those items so that they can clearly identify why we're paying them on the grant is really what they're wanting to see is what was purchased, was it allowable, and what was the purpose of why this would be allowable on the grant. So kind of more, the more description obviously would be better. But once again, we're not needing to know that you bought 5 pens and 2 erasers and that kind of thing. We don't need that much detail, but just, supplies for the office or, something like that would be fine as well if there's lots of little things on there. Any questions as far as like writing those line items, if you have anything little or big or let's see. It looks like we have one hand I can see at least.
Hi, yes. Can I ask? I'm in the example spreadsheet worksheet and I see a before and after. What is the before and since I haven't done this, what is the before and what is the after?
We're
Yeah,
gonna go over it.
Oh,
Yeah.
you are going to,
Yes,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We take our
yeah.
time.
I was gonna say, I was seeing if anybody had any questions on that, and now we will go through our example of what our before and after will look like for you guys. So that first line on line 11 was how you guys were putting them in before, right? That it was just a one line item, and it was just you only had to list salaries, benefits, just a total, right, for each category. And so, your total for the invoice was at 22,000, and you're just able to put a totals on each category, nice and simple. So this is where, like I say, it'll be a little bit more tedious because now they're wanting us to break those out. And so now instead of that one line item, now you might have like 15 line items that's going to make up that $22,000 invoice. So as you can see, they want to know under that salaries, now in that vendor pay column, they want to know who it is that got paid and what their job title is for that grant so that they can easily see, who is John Smith and why. Once again, the true rationale is why are we paying this person on the grant? So who is John Smith? Well, he was the coordinator, so that's the rationale. And then the pay periods, obviously, very helpful as to what pay period it is that we're paying. If it's not, very obvious, maybe, on this particular invoice, you had to back pay them. So if this is salaries from a different pay period of January 1st to March 31st, make sure to note that in the description. And then the percentage that they are on CCRC. If they're, not paid 100%, if you'll just put that percentage, if it's 10% on CCRC, um, that will be very helpful as well. And that might be clearly defined on your budget as well, but just being able to link that up so that they can say 10% was paid, and then we go on your budget and 10% was paid for John Smith. That's very easy to see on an audit trail. So just having that backup is great. And then obviously, benefits, they will have their own line as well. And, your backup documentation is just your ledgers, obviously, for all of those details. And then, just going still down, anything that shows up as a line item on your general ledger is what you're going to need a line item for on here. So we have, like, for our example, John Smith, he had a reimbursement under travel. And so we have to list out now, before it was just we could group all these together and just list that one thing. Well, so now we're having to break out and we're having to say he did the registration and that was $800. His hotel was 278. His flight was 213. So just breaking out each one of those line by line, which I know, you guys were doing those with the other spreadsheet with the food and travel. So hopefully this won't be too much different because now you won't need to do it on that one. You can actually just do it on this spreadsheet and show those broken out. So hopefully this one won't be too much harder, but so that's how you can see, like if somebody does have a reimbursement, just those broken out. That he just got the one in reimbursement, so that is why everything will just be listed under John Smith as the vendor because he obviously purchased everything, and so it'll show up under his name rather than listing. We didn't pay Southwest Airlines, that wouldn't be the vendor, it would be John Smith because he's actually the person we reimbursed, but that would be the description is we paid, they paid Southwest flight. Does anybody have any questions on that one?
I have just a general question.
Yeah.
You say that we are now combining the reports for cycle 1 and cycle 2?
No, no, the
No?
cycle 1 and cycle 2, they are listed in here, but they're still separate. So you will see here, there's institutions listed at cycle 1. And then
Okay.
as you scroll down forward, you will see cycle 2 over here. So basically they just live in this one spreadsheet, but we're not combining them. They're still separate.
Okay, so we still manage those particular
Exactly.
aspects of the grant
Exactly.
separately. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then, so just going down, like I say, all these others are, still the same. You're just breaking out those materials and supplies. And then you can see like our example are like 24 and 25, those Lowe's receipts. Those, that's where you can see those came from our example. And then, yeah, just everything else. And then obviously you can just do your IDC. You don't have to do an IDC on each of your line items. You can just do a total of what your IDC was and then just total that, yep, in that own IDC column. And so as you can see, the invoice is still the 22,157.98 when you total everything up, and that still was the same as the invoice that you submitted originally. It's just broken out a little bit more itemized, I guess, if you will, just so that they can clearly see how each expense is a little bit more clearly defined for them. So yeah, is there any questions as far as there might be a little bit of questions when you're going to fill these out, but as far as the overall process, maybe does anybody have any questions?
And I guess I want to ask too then, we fill this information out on the new spreadsheet, but when we submit our annual budget reports, we don't need to cut and paste this onto them. Is that correct? Or
That's correct.
as
That's correct.
as
The
long as
process.
we're maintaining it on the spreadsheet, then you all have access to it.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
this is a live spreadsheet, and I think there was also a quick comment in the chat. Everybody will have access to this. If you don't, definitely let me know, and we will grant you access. But as long as you're just filling out your own tabs for each cycle 1 separately, cycle 2 separately, and just giving us the backup support documents as you have been giving in one PDF, including financial ledger, receipts, and so forth. But we will also cover that in the refresher portion later on.
And then my other question is, my link to what used to be my cycle 2 spreadsheet is now obsolete because it's been wrapped up into the single spreadsheet.
Correct, correct.
Okay,
The yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
the only link that you will need to have is just to this main spreadsheet.
Got
The
it.
other two you could use it for, as a backup or just for the reference in case is needed. But everybody is going to be using just one spreadsheet for both
Mhm.
cycles, and the other one's NA at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question here, Mike Hoffman. So will this become also or continue as a cumulative spreadsheet?
As a cumulative spreadsheet.
So we're going to be, or do you want us to accumulate from the bottom or from the top?
From the you could see in the examples here. I'm just going to use, for example, Cabrillo over here. So this line item will need to be broken down, and then the next Q4 was going to go on line on line 19 below it. So it will be cumulative going down.
Line 19 is going to be taken up by a bunch of the
By
additional detail.
yes,
So
correct,
you're
correct.
saying that so if this ends at line 34, we're going to start at line 35 for the quarter.
Correct,
four.
correct, correct,
Okay.
correct.
So these will become extremely long.
Large,
Okay.
yes, precisely,
Understood.
precisely. We were trying to let the sponsor know that that's going to be the case. There's going to be a lot a lot more work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe bold that first line or something to show a new invoice or, something like that
Skip a
might be
space
helpful.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. We've tried to warn them. It's going to be a lot of information, but that's how they want it. So we'll just let them have it.
We tried. We tried for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
we
we really did fight. We really,
we
really
did.
did.
We
But,
really did.
okay. Well, if nobody has any more questions about this process, then we'll go to just our refresher items. Okay. So yeah, so just kind of wanted to go over some things that, like I say, we just always kind of have maybe some things that people might forget or, just kind of repetition things. So any of our out of state travel that always has to be pre-approved, and that's not through us, that's through the sponsor. And they want to, as of right now, they want to pre-approve everyone at their level. So before anybody does any kind of expense, where that's a conference registration or anything, please make sure that you send those in and get those pre-approved, because those can get pretty pricey, and we don't, want to tell you that those expenses are unallowable. So before you have anybody going to anything out of state, please send those in, and we'll, do our best to give a good explanation as to why they're related to the grant so that we can get those expenses covered. They've actually been, pretty good about allowing those out-of-state travel as long as they are, related to the grant. So hopefully that will continue. But yeah, please just make sure that you're sending those in before anybody travels is the key there. And then just wanted to go over the capital equipment once again. So I know when you submitted your budgets, you kind of all had the opportunity that anything over that $5,000 mark at that time, you could get the pre-approval then. So if you had on that original budget pre-approval equipment of anything over 5,000, then you don't have to get that pre-approved again. But if that was not done on your original budget, make sure that you get it done before you purchase anything going forward. And so just kind of want to give a little explanation about equipment, because maybe some of you don't know, and equipment I know has changed for some institutions. The OMB has gone up, and so some people have taken that 10,000 that they increased it to. But as far as this sponsor, they are saying it was what it was when the grant was signed. And so we are staying to the $5,000 limit. And so, so there's kind of different things that you can look at as equipment that we kind of might get the same question about. And so just kind of wanted to maybe go over some scenarios. So if I had like a $30,000 invoice, let's say, and I purchased 10 robots and they were $3,000 a piece, but it was $30,000. So that would not be considered equipment because one unit is under the $5,000. So that's not equipment. If, but then if I had a $30,000 invoice and I purchased 5 robots and they were $6,000 a piece, now those 5 robots are equipment because each one is more than $5,000. So each one of those would be considered equipment. And so you would have to get pre-approval for those ones. And then there's the third equipment piece, which I don't know if any of you do this, but sometimes I know that it kind of could happen with like maybe robots or something. But if you had a $30,000 invoice, and each piece might be only $3,000, but it's to make up one robot. So it's like maybe a leg, each leg costs $3,000 and an arm is 3,000. And so you have all these components that make up a robot. So I don't know if you have Optimus Prime or I don't know, whatever those robots are called. You have one super robot. Um, and that makes one unit. So that unit now is an equipment because if you put them all together, he is 30, that's a $30,000 robot to the university now. So that is labeled equipment. So there's varying equipment kind of things. And so if anybody have any questions about is it considered, please reach out and we can help you determine that. And once again, those do go to the sponsor and they deem if, I know a lot of you have been able to purchase things over the 5,000 and that's been allowed. So please just reach out. That's usually actually not up to us. We send that on to the sponsor and they let us know if it's okay or not. So if you have any questions, please just ask before you purchase is always the way to go on those ones. And then just kind of wanted to cover a little bit on travel because, sometimes those can get a little bit hard to determine the allowable rates. We always just go off of the California State website. And so whatever is on that website is what we use. We try to keep up when we, on these spreadsheets with what the allowable rates are. They can change and it's not like we get an email or something. So I would just suggest, if before somebody travels to just check this to make sure. But currently they are the breakfast 16, lunch 19, dinner 28, and those incidentals 5. So, excuse me. And then, and remember that that does include tax, gratuity, and delivery. And our gratuity, it should never be over that 20% for those tips. So, yeah, and like I say, just always consult that website because we just go with whatever the rate is at that time when they traveled. So always kind of keep that in mind.
And we also just a quick note, we're also not anticipating for them to change on a monthly basis. They usually do it once a year around October. So we might get an extra dollar in October. Just FYI.
Yes, yep, exactly. And just to note that and I know that each of you, I'm sure you all have your own rates like through your institution. And so you're going to have employees that are going to submit those. And, that's just fine that the university pays them a different rate. But when you submit them on your invoices to us, we're going to have to put those rates down as far as what gets reimbursed to you guys on those invoices because we do have to the sponsor obviously trumps everybody else. So we only get to submit what we can to the sponsor. So that's why on some of your invoices, we do have to write down those travel costs because we do have to adjust those mills sometimes. And the same thing on per diem. I know a lot of institutions will pay per diem on those food costs where this grant does not pay per diem. They pay only on actuals. Okay, and then on hotel, kind of the same thing that we have that $250 max per night. and that is set by the sponsor. That does not include taxes and fees. So just making sure that that base is under 250. Once again, you know, if they go over that and your university pays over that, that's great. But as far as what you can submit on your invoice, that does have to be written down to the 250. But taxes and fees can't go over that. Also, if they are staying at a hotel where, you know, sometimes you get that free breakfast, obviously we cannot pay a breakfast on top of that. So just make sure that you're aware of that when you're submitting those, that if we see that on those hotels that they do include that free breakfast, we'll have to, you know, disallow the breakfast if you're submitted a expense for that one. And also, if you know you're going on some kind of a conference or a meeting of some sort and you're in the travel status, we obviously can't pay meals if the conference um, includes those, because a lot of the times our conference registrations, that's part of the cost, is to pay for your food. So if those conferences, you know, pay, a lot of them will pay breakfast or lunch or something usually. So if that cost is in there, then we cannot pay that particular meal. So just remember those when you're doing those travel costs that, you know, Katya is very good about keeping track of all of those. And so sometimes you'll see those adjustments on your invoice if those things are submitted. Also, when you're submitting your travel and food, just remember to attach those agendas, schedules, dates, maps, you know, who attended, all your receipts. You know, almost we would say on these ones that you would think too much is not good, but sometimes we would rather have more than less, just because those agendas is a lot of times where we can see if there was, you know, the meals provided. And obviously we need to know the dates to know for sure that hotels were, you know, we can only pay for certain nights if people were to stay extra days for whatever reason. So the more information kind of is better on those ones, so that we can determine to make sure that, you know, we're submitting everything that is allowable. On those receipts, I know I have it down below, but those receipts are crucial. I know a lot of institutions that do the per diem, they don't require the staff to submit invoices or submit their receipts for those. But for this grant, like I say, they only reimburse on actuals. So if we don't have a receipt for, you know, a breakfast that was purchased, then they're not going to reimburse on that. So even though your institution might not require it, this grant does. So just make sure your travelers are always keeping those receipts for anything that they do purchase, and including those. And along with that, the like the credit card receipt that just has the total, we can't really accept those. It has to be the itemized receipt, just so that we can verify, you know, the things that aren't allowed, like alcohol, and making sure that the tip isn't above the 20% and those type things. That's why we have to have the itemized receipt. So making sure that they're attaching the correct receipt from those restaurants as well. Also, when you're traveling, and if it's like a team dinner, or, you know, if it's a field trip or something, and you're having to do a list for all the people that attended, to just make sure you're attaching those lists so that we can see how many people, to make sure that the per cost is correct. So just making sure that those are attached, and like I say, attached itemized receipts, and making sure that you are showing the paid purchase orders. So like the invoice that was paid, we can't, if you just attach a purchase order, we can't reimburse off of that. It has to show that you actually paid the purchase order. Does anybody, if anybody has any questions on that, let me know. But obviously, you know, a purchase order just says that you are gonna buy something, but we have to show that it was actually paid for. So we need the actual invoice on that one. Let's see, and then the quarterly invoice submissions. Katya has attached a PDF that shows, I think we've like given that out as well many times, that just shows the dates of when things are due. So if anybody has any questions on that, let us know, or if you don't have access to that, but that is attached, that just shows, you know, when your, I should say when the biannual ones, but your quarterly invoice submissions, that's also on the PDF that just shows when everything is due. And so your next one is due July 15th. So, and those are for expenses from April 1st through June 30th.
And also, we would like to ask everybody to fill out this as well by 7/15/26. So at the same time as your Q4 is due, these will need to be broken down, because at that point in time, we're going to be reporting to the state after that.
Thank you. Okay, and then on your just with your invoices, just wanted to go over again to make sure to include the cover letter, a detailed financial ledger report showing the staff names, pay periods, and specific operating procedures. We do have that little payroll expenditure needs to be supported by payroll records, job descriptions, duties, statements. If staff charge less than 100% to K16, please provide the actual timesheet or time allocation methods. And that's from the contract. But that's not something that we are going to, like, you don't have to do that every time on an invoice. I'll just go back to this, the sample. Like, if you have John Smith coordinator and you have that person on your budget and you've given the description of what that person is doing on the grant, that is going to be sufficient. Like, that's all we need, saying he's 10% on the grant and you're showing that he's paid 10% of his salary. That's all that's going to be required. When we get down to timesheets, if you're doing wages, I'll tell you right now, we're not going to submit timesheets to them. So if that is required at a later date, we'll address that at that time. But as long as you can produce a payroll report that shows that they worked this many hours and this, you know, this was their pay, that is all we're going to do right now. Just because I've been to too many grant conferences where auditors love to get a hold of timesheets. So we at this time will not be asking for any timesheets. We'll give them other financial documents that will support the payroll. But we won't be asking timesheets from you guys right now. Well, probably never. I hope never. But just want to make sure that you understand that they might be asking for like documentation as to if they're paid on something else to show that. But once again, that should be very clear on any of you guys's financial documents, that this person, you know, is paid 10% of a salary, or they work this many hours a week on the CCR grant. So I would assume that any, you know, backup documentation would clearly show that. So hopefully that will be sufficient. And then just the last item is just make sure to review all your receipts and ensure all are included. And then, you know, just kind of, if you could keep them in the same order as you do the invoice, like, you know, your payroll, benefits, you know, and then just kind of how they go in order of the cover sheet would go, you know, kind of like your supplies, you know. It just kind of makes it easier on us that it's like follows down the line as far as, you know, like travel and then materials and supplies and consultants. If it reads that way, it's just easier on us, obviously, because like I say, reviewing quite a few of these a month can get tedious. And so if we're not having to scroll down a whole bunch in a PDF, it makes it a lot easier on us. But just make sure you're submitting all of those just in one PDF would be great.
And also, I'm seeing in the chat some folks do not have access to the cover letter. Go ahead and email me if anybody has any access issues or does not have a cover letter. Go ahead and reach out to me. I'll give you access as well as all the documents. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
But
Well, that was all that I had. Like I said, did anybody have, I know that was kind of a quick refresher. Does anybody have any questions? I haven't really been watching the chat for anything. So did anybody have anything?
yeah, Bree, is there anything in the chat that we should address? I'll take it as a no.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Okay.
All right.
Well, I'm not sure what happened to John, but he
No,
usually.
I'm here.
Oh, okay.
There's John.
I apologize. A couple of us ended up in a different link in a different Zoom all by ourselves.
Oh,
So I apologize for being late. I want to thank everyone for being here. I hope you understand that the state is requiring some new ways in which we report this information. We're not changing the way, but they want us to change the way. And we avoided having to do it all the way back to the beginning of our collaborative, which would have been a tremendous amount of work. Thank you for taking the time to participate in this training. We're here to help you and support you. Reach out to Katya, Colleen, or myself, and we'll work to support you in getting this invoicing in the correct format. And thanks to Katya and Colleen for their clarity in presenting this material. But feel free to ask any questions now or in the future. Thanks.
thank you so much, everybody, for your attendance.